Although these conference affiliations won't go into effect until next season, until 2024, this season, this postseason, this playoff is proving that the age of the Power 2 is truly upon us. And it all revolves around the college football playoff.
From LA to Piscataway, all Big Ten all year long. This is Big Ten 10.
Let me throw out some numbers for you that really demonstrate where the Big Ten and the SEC sit going into bowl season, going into the postseason, and of course, going in to the 4-team college football playoff. 12 of the 13 teams, the top 13 in the final college football playoff rankings next season will either be Big Ten members or SEC members. Out of the New Year's 6, 4 out of the 6 games in the conference affiliations that start in 2024 will be Big Ten versus SEC matchups. So 4 out of those 6 New Year's 6 games this season. Oregon is in the Fiesta Bowl. Georgia is in the Orange Bowl. So that makes 10 out of the 12 teams that qualified for the New Year's 6 this season will either be Big Ten members or SEC members next season. The two on the outside looking in of those conferences, Liberty, the group of 5 representative, and Florida State. And if reports are to be believed, maybe Florida State would be joining that group sooner than later. This season is the bridge, I think, to the future of college football. And that is the age of the Power 2, the growing resources that teams and programs will continue to have in the Big Ten and the SEC. You're going to see them be able to compete at a higher level, at this playoff and national championship caliber level, maybe compared to some of those teams in the ACC or the Big 12. Not saying that the Big 12 teams or the ACC teams or some of these other teams won't be able to compete. But you look at the programs, you look at the names in the Big 10 and the SEC right now and where they're at this season as we look to the future of 2024, it is clear that this season is paving the way for the future of college football. Let's focus on the college football playoff, the ultimate Big Ten versus SEC battle. And the first matchup, of course, that we're going to focus on is the granddaddy of them all, the Rose Bowl game. College football playoff semifinal number 1. Of course, it pits the undefeated Big Ten champions, the Michigan Wolverines, the top-ranked team in all of college football. They are going up against the champions of the SEC, the Alabama Crimson Tide, the team that ended Georgia's 29-game win streak, the team that allowed the Minnesota Golden Gophers fans to pop the champagne as they remain the last three-peat national champion in college football history. You know, when I look at this Rose Bowl and I really start to break this thing down and look at both of these teams, I see a lot of similarities between both the Michigan Wolverines and the Alabama Crimson Tide. They have a quarterback that can get around a little bit. J.J. McCarthy, we know his ability to run. Of course, Jalen Milroe on the other side for the Alabama Crimson Tide. I see some good defenses, and Michigan might be a little bit better than Alabama statistically, but I see really good talent on both sides of the both sides on the defensive side of the football. I see physical football teams. You know, I know Nick Saban has kind of evolved. You know, you look at that 2020 team with Mac Jones and Devontae Smith and how they're able to throw it all around the yard. I know the SEC has really been evolving, you know, with the pass game in modern day college football. But I think in their heart of hearts, Nick Saban and Jim Harbaugh, they want to be physical football teams. They want to be hard-nosed. And when I look at these teams, I kind of see that from both Alabama and Michigan, at least from what I've seen so far from Alabama. I took a look at their game in the second half against the Georgia Bulldogs, and I saw a team that went nose-to-nose with a Georgia team that maybe has been the most physical team in the country these last few seasons. In this matchup, Michigan, you have got to be aware of Dallas Turner, right? We have talked about, right, ever since the injury to Zach Zinter, this last game in the Big Ten championship game with Iowa was kind of the first full game without Zach Zinter. And you saw what Iowa did. You saw how they kind of schemed around it a little bit, didn't you? Dallas Turner, 13.5 tackles for loss, 9 sacks. Is Alabama going to figure out a way to scheme up some openings to get free against this Michigan offensive line with the shuffling that they've had, now moving Carson Barnhart to the inside of that offensive line? That's something certainly to watch out for. Michigan needs to find a way to contain Dallas Turner in this game. Can Michigan run the football? Will Michigan be able to line up at the line of scrimmage and go at Alabama's defense? You look at the Big Ten title game against the Michigan Wolverines, against the Iowa Hawkeyes, Michigan versus Iowa in the Big Ten championship game. Iowa did a really good job at stacking up at the line of scrimmage and containing and bottling up this Wolverines run game. Can Alabama turn on that Iowa tape and do some very similar things? Those are questions are going to have to be answered as well. Alabama, 23rd in the country against the pass. They're 31st in the country against the run. I have this in capital letters. I have this in bold letters that I'm looking at on my notes right now. Contain Jalen Milroe. You can't let the Alabama quarterback run game go wild. You need to find a way to bottle that up. Keep it between the tackles. If I am those edge guys on the outside, the Josiah Stewarts, the Jalen Harrells, the Braden McGregors, guys like that, you need to keep contained. I grew up in grade school and high school, right? Fairly elementary style level of football, and I played defensive end, and it's all about keeping contained, wider than the widest. That's what Michigan, especially in this matchup against Alabama and Jalen Milroe, I look around at this offense, all right? And I see some decent players. I see some good players. But I think the largest threat, it seems, is the running ability and the legs of Jalen Milroe. If they can keep that contained, I think the Michigan Wolverines have a really solid shot at winning this football game. Alabama has some good personnel. They have some good players. They've got some future NFL players in that secondary. We've seen at times J.J. McCarthy. We saw it against Maryland. Remember, there were back-to-back passes on that drive late in the first half. One of them was dropped. The other one was caught in the end zone for an interception. We saw it last year, 2 pick sixes against TCU. We even saw it in the Big Ten championship game against Iowa where they dropped an interception. There are times when J.J. McCarthy doesn't make the best decisions. And Alabama wants to get that J.J. McCarthy. Michigan needs to have the good J.J. McCarthy in this football game as well. This is going to be an epic battle between the Michigan Wolverines and the Alabama Crimson Tide. The current Big Ten versus SEC battle champions going at it in the Rose Bowl. It is going to be a fantastic setting, no question about that. Now, as we look towards the future of 2024, that's where the Sugar Bowl comes in. You've got the undefeated 13-0 Washington Huskies, future Big Ten member, champions this season, the final champions of the Pac-12, going up against the third-ranked 12-1 Big 12 champions, future SEC member, Texas Longhorns. This is the battle for the future. One of these teams is going to be able to claim a victory and say, look around the rest of this conference, the one that they're going into in 2024, they're going to be able to look at the very least, a majority of the conference, depending on who makes it in this one and who makes it in the other semifinal. And they're going to be able to say, we played for the national championship right when they step into their new conference in 2024. We played for the national title, and most of you did not. And they're going to be able to carry that momentum into their new league in 2024. Who's it going to be? Who's it going to be? I mentioned maybe good defenses, physicality, stuff like that in that matchup in the Rose Bowl. When I look at the Sugar Bowl between Washington and Texas, could we have kind of the flip side of the Michigan-Iowa game? And that is great quarterbacks and a lot of scoring. We know about these quarterbacks. Michael Penix Jr., when he is on, he is one of the very best in all of college football. Quinn Ewers on the other side for Texas is pretty darn good as well. Both of these offenses have really good wide receivers out on the perimeter. And when you look at defenses, these aren't exactly the greatest in the world like teams like Michigan or Alabama. Texas is 95th in the country in pass defenses. There were teams this year in the Big 12 that were able to move the football down the field, that were able to score some points on the Texas Longhorns. And although Washington had a better performance against Bo Nix and the Oregon Ducks in the Pac-12 championship game, this is still a defense that, was not one of the Pac-12's best defensive units out there. And in theory, teams can move the ball up and down the field. Look what USC was able to do in that game at the Coliseum, putting up 42 up there on the Washington Huskies. So this game could be back and forth and back and forth. Remember that Rose Bowl a few years back, Baker Mayfield for Oklahoma going up against Georgia, where they went up and down the field. I could see that possibly happen in New Orleans here in this Sugar Bowl game. Here's one thing to keep in mind. Because because Michigan was the number 1 seed, they get the pick of where they wanted to play. They go to the traditional site for the Big Ten champion. They go to the Rose Bowl. So then the other game takes place in whatever the other semifinal site that is that year. This year, it's the Sugar Bowl. Okay, it's not exactly a friendly traveling location, not exactly a travel-friendly trip for Washington fans going down to the Bayou to New Orleans. For Texas, for fans in Austin, that's not too bad of a drive. That's pretty good. That's doable for them. Could this be a home field advantage for the Texas Longhorns? That's something to look out for. You saw in Vegas, when Washington fans show up, they can make a difference. You've seen it this year, the greatest setting in college football, as they call it there in Seattle. Washington fans make the trip. This could be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the Huskies. Make the trip, create at the very least a 50-50 environment. I believe Texas, you got to get pressure on Michael Penix, and I think the same for Washington on Quinn Ewers. Which defense is going to get more pressure on the other? Which quarterback is going to be more uncomfortable? Or is this just going to be a 52-49 game? Whoever's the football last scores. All right, you look at the Texas passing attack. Xavier Worth, Adonai Mitchell combined for 15 touchdowns, just over 1,700 yards this season. Washington held Oregon's threats in check. Guys like Tez Johnson and Troy Franklin. I know Troy was kind of banged up in that game. Can they do the same with the Texas Longhorns? I think that's certainly something that needs to be talked about. But this is a Washington team. I look at Texas, and I think Washington can beat Texas if they play their best. Getting that run game going with Dylan Johnson like they did, getting that offensive line pushing forward ahead, I think is another key part to winning this game, possibly limiting the possessions that Texas has in this game. But I think for a different reason, this is still going to be an outstanding matchup as well. So you've got future Big Ten and SEC, current Big Ten and SEC, but this just expands further than just the college football playoff as well. This expands to the New Year's Six and the rest of bowl season as well. In the New Year's Six, the Peach Bowl in Atlanta, Penn State and Ole Miss, man, they have been back-to-back in the rankings. It seems like this whole season, these are two of the best multi-loss teams in college football, and they have been that way for a good amount of time in the back half of the season in the month of November for both Penn State and Ole Miss. Penn State, physicality, run game. We'll see if they open it up a little bit with Drew Aller. I've caught Ole Miss a few times. I caught him on Thanksgiving night. Haven't been overly impressed with the Rebels. I'm not going to lie. I believe Penn State can win this game in the Peach Bowl, but you got to get Drew Aller going. All of these games, now that we're out of the playoff, all these games depend on opt-outs. What's the wide receiver situation going to be like? Are we going to have Keandre Lambert-Smith? Are we going to have Dante Cephas? Those are big questions. If we do, I feel pretty good about Penn State. I feel really good about Penn State's defense matching up and causing problems with Ole Miss. I saw what Mississippi State was able to do for a lot of that game on Thanksgiving night, and I feel pretty confidently about what the Nittany Lions can possibly do in Atlanta. You move down to the Cotton Bowl, I just think Ohio State has more talent than Missouri. Right, all due respect, Missouri going 10-2 is no small feat out there in the SEC, right? But, they had to kick a field goal late to beat Kansas State in overtime, or at least late in that game. That was a big thing at the time. Maybe as time goes by, maybe it's less impressive. But I just think Ohio State has more talent. Even you're going to see opt-outs, but now is the time where you're going to see some of these Ohio State wide receivers have to step up. The depth of talent in the wide receiver room could be on full display. How about freshman Carnell Tate getting more involved? Some of these true freshmen, 3 out of the top 5 in last year's class committed and are on this Ohio State team. Let's see them go to work. I just think there's more talent across the board, but I could see opt-outs hitting Ohio State hard. I'd have to look more into where Missouri is at in terms of upperclassmen, but it just seems to me like the Buckeyes just have more talent. Let's see Kyle McCord get in rhythm and really move the ball up and down the field. Kind of a contrast of styles between the Iowa Hawkeyes and the Tennessee Volunteers. We know all about Iowa. We know all about their defense. Tennessee and Josh Heupel, we kind of know what they're about on the offensive side of the ball. Can Iowa this game up enough to get out of this thing with a win over Tennessee? I've been watching these rankings. I think Tennessee is one of the most overrated teams in the college football playoff rankings. We'll see if Iowa, look at that, an 8-4 record out there for the Volunteers. That screams SEC bias. But I look at this thing for Iowa. Let's see you take it to them and be physical, especially on defense. Bring the heat. ReliaQuest Bowl. All right, when we talk about opt-outs, this is going to have some pretty big ones, because if this doesn't have opt-outs down there in Tampa, this is a scary game for Wisconsin, and not in a good way. Right, Jaden Daniels in that offense, even though the Tiger defense is not great, right? This is not a great matchup, right, for Wisconsin against LSU. Pre-opt-outs. Post-opt-outs, let's see what happens. Of course, no Braylon Allen for Wisconsin, and we're assuming no Jaden Daniels for LSU. Maybe that could even the playing field a little bit for Wisconsin. I could see Tanner Mordecai really moving the ball against this not great LSU defense. That is one game where opt-outs is really going to sway the game. That is going to be an unpredictable ball game, in my humble Big Ten opinion. And then, of course, the Music City Bowl, finishing this Big Ten SEC Bowl extravaganza up Maryland. Okay, while you were focused on conference championship games, while you were focused on the college football playoff, quietly, Maryland lost one of their best receivers in Corey Dyches, lost their top defender and linebacker, Jayshon Barham, both to the transfer portal. Those are big losses, folks. Those are big losses, right? And you could see some opt-outs if they don't have Taulia Tagovailoa. I have a feeling that Taulia, considering the amount of time and effort he's put into Maryland football, I would believe he would play in this bowl game. And you look at Auburn. Auburn's a team right now this is a team that lost to New Mexico State. All credit in the world to New Mexico State and Jerry Kill, right? We love him. At least we should love him here in Minnesota, in Gopher land, despite his relationship with PJ Fleck and what he's said in the past. That's still a good team, but as Auburn, you got to beat New Mexico State. You got to beat New Mexico State at home. That's why they schedule those cupcakes, right, late in the season, is to win those games. I believe pretty strongly that despite opt-outs, despite transfers, Maryland can get the job done. But it remains to be seen what exactly is going to happen going forward. Folks, the Big Ten and SEC power play is in full effect with those bowl games. With the Sugar Bowl game, Washington and Texas, and then with that Rose Bowl game as well between the Michigan Wolverines and the Alabama Crimson Tide. This bowl season could say a lot in terms of what we see going forward with the college football playoff expanding to 12 teams in 2024.
Thanks for watching Big Ten TED, where it's all Big Ten all year long. Make sure to like the video to spread the word of Big Ten TED to the masses, and subscribe to the channel for updates on Big Ten content that drops every day.